friends! So today I am going to be doing my January wrap-up. I read 10 books in January, which I am super happy with, and if any of you watched my January TBR, in that video I said that I probably wouldn't be able to get to all the books because most of them were around 450 pages and 2 of them were over 500 pages, so I think I described it as unaccomplishable. Well, I finished all of those books plus 2 other ones, so needless to say, I'm very happy with myself. I think I read around 4,000 pages, maybe a little over. I'm going to try and do more statistics in my monthly wrap-ups. I like to do them at the end of the year, but I also just want to do them monthly. So for now I only got pages, but next month I'm going to try and keep track of like ratings and all of that. So yeah, let's just get started with the reviews. So the first book that I read in January was Heartless by Marissa Meyer. This is a Queen of Hearts origin story. So it follows Catherine, who is the daughter of a noble family, and her family, specifically her mother, really wants her to marry into nobility as well. But Catherine just wants to open a bakery with her friend. Unfortunately for her, she ends up catching the eye of the King of Hearts and he begins courting her, which is great for her parents, but she is not as fond of it, and she actually ends up kind of having feelings for the court's jester. So this basically just follows Catherine in her decision of whether she wants to be with the King of Hearts or start this bakery with her friend and end up disappointing her parents. So for those of you who don't know, Marissa Meyer also wrote The Lunar Chronicles, which I absolutely adored. It was my all-time favorite series of 2017. And also, if you know me at all, then you know that I love Alice in Wonderland. So needless to say, I had super high expectations for this book. I had been anticipating it for a really long time, and I'm so happy to say that all of my expectations were met. This was a 5 out of 5 star read. I absolutely adored everything about this book. The world, obviously, because it's set in Wonderland, but I loved the characters. The writing was amazing, and I just loved everything about this. The story, obviously, I don't think it's a spoiler that the story obviously is going to be quite sad because you know that it's going to end with her becoming the Queen of Hearts because it's her origin story. So you kind of go into it knowing that it's going to be sad, and I went into it knowing that, and it broke my heart, but at the same time there were so many parts of this story that made me have all the feels, and I was so happy at times and then it was so sad at times, and I just love this story. But let me tell you, the final line of this book, I wish I could say I'm being dramatic, but I'm not. Like, it was so good, and I would love this to be turned into a movie because I just feel like it'd be so good. When you're reading this, you definitely have to get out of the mindset of like any other Alice in Wonderland film you've seen, like any of the Tim Burton films, because I know that in the second one they kind of go into a Queen of Hearts origin story, so you have to just totally forget about any of those. And I would definitely recommend reading the original Alice in Wonderland story, which I had read it previously a couple years back, but I reread it in December, and that was the last book that I read before reading this one, and it definitely helped with just like remembering the world and the characters, and it was just so good. I have no bad things to say about this book. Next up, I read City of Bones and City of Ashes by Cassandra Clare. This is book 1 and 2 in the Mortal Instruments series, which I have never read before. This is my first time reading them. I am actually doing single reviews / discussion videos for each of these books that I read. So I did one for this one, which the first half is spoiler free, and then the second half has spoilers, and then for this one I did a full spoilery discussion on it. So if you want to learn more of my thoughts about either of these books, you can click the link to them up in the eye in the corner. Just as a little overview, I gave City of Bones 3 stars. I quite enjoyed it a lot more than I thought I was going to, but it still didn't blow my mind or anything. And I gave City of Ashes 2 stars. I like this significantly less, but yeah, they were still pretty good. Next up, I read the Matched Trilogy by Ali Condi. So this includes Matched, Crossed, and Reached. So the Matched Trilogy is a dystopian series where in this society everything is super controlled. When the society was first formed, they basically took like 100 books, 100 songs, 100 poems, 100 pieces of art, and then destroyed all the other ones, and only those 100 things are what they have access to in this society. They also pick out the food that you eat and what size portion you get and what kind of job you have, what house you live in, how many children you can have. It's all super, super controlled. And when you're 17, you go to a matched banquet where you're basically matched with the person that you are going to marry. Or you can choose to be a single, but then you can't have a family or children or anything like that. So this book follows our main girl, whose name I'm not sure really how to pronounce. I think it's Cassia, but I might be wrong. But she is 17, so this book opens up on her matched banquet where she ends up being matched with her friend that she knows, which is really unlikely because usually you're matched with someone who like lives in some other like province. But she ends up being matched with her best friend, and she's given this little like card thing where she can learn information about him that she basically already knows because she's his friend. When she gets home, she looks at this card and the image appears on it of her friend's face, but then all of a sudden his face disappears and another boy's face pops up. And she begins to wonder whether she was actually supposed to be matched with this boy or her friend. Needless to say, if you don't like love triangles, then I would not recommend this series. But yeah, that's basically the premise of what this book is about. It mainly focuses on the love story, but of course there's a whole corrupt government thing going on in the back. So I gave this first book 3.5 stars. Upon reading the rest of the books, I would probably give this a bit of a lower rating, but let's just focus on this book for right now. I enjoyed the characters. I always say that I just love dystopian books. I've wanted to read this one since before I even started my booktube channel like 2 years ago, so I've been looking forward to reading this trilogy for a very long time. And with the first book, I was pretty happy with it. It was just like your standard dystopian book that we all know and love, and I enjoyed it. Then we get to the second book, Crossed, which I ended up giving 1 star, maybe 1.5. I did not enjoy this book at all. I just didn't like where the story went after this. This definitely had like second book syndrome. It just wasn't very good. You could definitely tell that it was just a setup for the third book, and I just felt like nothing really happened in this book. Nothing particularly interesting went on, and I noticed a lot in this book that I felt like there was a lot of stuff that the author kind of like skipped out on writing harder points of the story. Like there was a part of the story where they literally were talking about scaling this cliff, and they had to like decide who was going to go up first and yada yada yada, and after they discussed that, which was literally pointless, the scene cuts and it opens up again when they've already scaled the mountain, and it just kind of felt like it was a bit of a cop-out because writing that scene may have been a little bit more difficult, if you know what I'm saying. It was just like, we talk about who's gonna go up the mountain, which we didn't really need to for the story. Like it was kind of pointless, and then you don't even talk about that, and like something exciting could have happened there, someone could have fallen or something. Like I just felt like there were parts of the story that were a bit of a cop-out with the writing. Then we get to the third book, which I gave 2 stars. I enjoyed this one more than the second one, but not as much as the first one. I think one of the things without spoiling, like the first book, it takes place in the society, and the second book doesn't really, and then this one they're back in the society again, and I think I just liked that setting a lot more. It felt much more dystopian when they were in that setting, and I think that's what I liked about it. Still, with this book, I just felt like it dragged on. It was very long, and it was quite like an anticlimactic ending. Like, I don't know, I just wasn't very impressed with it. So overall, I would probably give the trilogy as a whole a 2-star rating. Next up, I read The Melancholy Death of Oyster Boy and Other Stories by Tim Burton. This is basically like a poetry collection by Tim Burton, which I had no idea that he had a book. If I knew, I would have read this a heck of a lot sooner. But I had just heard about this on someone else's channel, and I immediately checked it out from the library and read it in like 20 minutes. All the poems are like really short. Like some of them are only like a page long, so it's a super quick read. But I absolutely adored this. Again, anyone who knows me knows that I love Tim Burton films and characters and just the whole creepiness of his films. I absolutely love them, and I loved this book just as much. I gave it 5 out of 5 stars. I would describe this as like a creepy version of Dr. Seuss, but like not for children. I mean, it's debatable, but I wouldn't say it's for children. I really enjoyed this. It's obviously not for people who don't like things that are creepy or just like very strange. You're not gonna like understand the idea behind it if you don't like that kind of stuff, but I really enjoyed it. Next up, I read The Chemist by Stephanie Meyer. This is an adult thriller mystery that follows this woman who used to work for the US government, and this book opens up where she has been on the run for 3 years, and the place that she used to work for has been trying to kill her, and she just ends up being swept up in all this kind of government garbage stuff. Yeah, I didn't like this book. It was a very, very disappointing read. I don't even know a final rating on it. I want to say it's somewhere between like 1 and 2 stars. It's marketed as like a thriller, but there was really nothing thrilling about this book. When I kind of heard the synopsis about it, of how it was a woman who used to work for the government and then now the government is trying to kill her, I kind of thought that the book would open with her working for the government and then like something happens and she has to escape, and then there are these attempts on her life and she's on the run. That's what I thought it was going to be about, but it ended up opening 3 years after she's already been on the run for 3 years, and like I was like, didn't we like skip all the exciting parts? Because like that's what I was kind of hoping for. That's what I thought it would have been about. And so we're following this woman who, I mean, I will give it that like the strategy and everything behind everything that she did, and she was like a chemist, so everything that she does is basically formed around chemistry and that kind of stuff, which I don't understand at all. But in that aspect, it was very like interesting and really well done. But at the same time, you're following this woman who is like super paranoid of anything, and she literally like sleeps in the bathtub of her house with a gas mask on because her whole house is like booby trapped. And I feel like if it would have started with her working for the government and you see like what happened that made her on the run, you could maybe understand her feelings a bit more. But because we don't really know what happened, you're just like following this woman who seems paranoid out of her mind, and you just feel like she's really overreacting. At least that's how I felt for most of this book. Besides all that, there was also a romance in this book which I just felt was really weird, and I really hated the love interest in this book. Like, something very traumatic happens to this guy, and after it's said and done, like, this guy should be like scared out of his mind. Like, he should be having horrible PTSD at this point, but after it's said and done, he's just like, it was fine, it's all fine, and I'm just like, no, it's not. So yeah, overall, I was just really disappointed in this book. Everything that I said you probably won't understand unless you've read this book, but yeah, I didn't like this book at all. And then the last 2 books that I read were actually for the 24 and 48 readathon, which is where you try to read for 24 hours in a span of 48 hours. So every time you read, you like time yourself, and it should add up to 24 hours. I did vlog the whole thing, so if you want to see how I did, you can click the link to that video up in the card in the corner. But on the first day of the readathon, I read the entirety of City of Glass, I was gonna say Ashes. As I said, I am doing full spoilery discussion videos on this, but I haven't filmed or uploaded that one yet, so when I do, you can look out for that one to learn more of my thoughts on this book. But I ended up giving this one 3.75 out of 5 stars. This was definitely my favorite one out of all of them, and I've heard that for a lot of people this is their favorite book in the series, or at least like out of the first 3. And I can definitely see why that is. Like, this one definitely was the best out of the 3, but it still didn't wow me enough to get like a full 4-star rating. And then the final book that I read in January was The Only Pirate at the Party by Lindsay Sterling. This is a memoir or autobiography about her life. Really enjoyed this book. I gave it 4 out of 5 stars. I never knew that she was like such a funny person. Like, this book had me laughing left and right. Like, it was hilarious. But yeah, it was so good I even convinced my mom to read it, which she is not a big reader, and she's enjoying this book so far because it also is making her laugh quite a bit. So yeah, I really recommend this book if you like memoirs or if you're a fan of Lindsay Sterling. So yeah, those were all of the books that I read in January. Leave me a comment down below and let me know what your favorite book was that you read in January. Mine was definitely Heartless, if you could not tell. And yeah, that is all for this video. I hope you guys enjoyed it. If you did, please give it a big thumbs up and subscribe if you haven't already, and I'll see you in my next one. Bye! I read the idea that Tim Burton, that's the one.